Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room, broadcasting on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi. We're in Mombasa 87.9, in Kisumu 102.5, Nakuru 96.0, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. www.spicefm.co.ke worldwide, as well as Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We are live streaming there. Tag us on our individual Twitter handles at Nduoko, NDUOKOH, at CT Muga, CTMUGA, at Eric Latif, at ERICLATIFF. Good morning. Now we're talking about the BBI and what the BBI report is saying. Can we do our own BBI rally this morning?
Wow.
BBI. Tunataka. The BBI has talked about one of the things that it identified as ailing the country is one, a lack of trust in government, lack of trust in leadership, a lack of trust in church, but also a breakdown of national ethos and values. And it very much talks about we need to bring ourselves back to a place where we feel one as a country. We feel that we belong to a nation, not just people who are within borders of a certain country. We need to feel that we are a nation. So we have discussed this many times, even on this show. We've talked about, how people feel that we have a broken down values in our system. Why we have lost very many values. Why is it that we see so much corruption permeating itself in our society? Is it just corruption of taking? Is it an issue of greed? Is it a breakdown on values? And I think we have all said here that it's a breakdown on values. And then we've also talked about, so how is this being propagated? One of the ways in which it's propagated, we have also talked about it, is through what people consume, what we see on a daily basis, what we keep highlighting as the important stuff, as, what matters to a nation. If it's about having wealth, gathering wealth, being as wealthy as possible, and then we elevate those who have a lot of wealth, regardless of how they acquired it.
I think one of the critical factors in all of this is realizing that all of these things happen over time. There's nothing that happens as a snap of the finger kind of response to anything. So if there's a situation whereby there is distrust, it's not something that was done yesterday and then the people are now no longer trusting. If there was mismanagement or theft of money, it's not something that was stolen yesterday and then somebody's wealthy today. It's an action that was repeated over time. And to get to that place whereby you don't trust your leaders, you don't trust your religious leaders or organizations, you don't trust the system in the country, it's obviously a situation that has come about as a result of historical experience. And it's something that has happened repetitively over time. And that's why then somebody now bears what they bear currently. In order to remove something like that, of course, then takes as much work, even more work, than what was put in to get you to that place in the first instance. So for us to say that, there's a degradation of, what did you say? Degradation of morals.
And ethos and values.
Ethos and values. People don't believe a certain thing anymore. That means at some point they did. Or at some point there was a benchmark upon which they thrust this particular belief. So something that has happened that has eroded all of this. And I think if we deal with the symptoms, then we're not really helping ourselves. But what was the problem in the first place? And I think that is perhaps what should have been, is really then what needs to be addressed. Because upon that, and then the removal of such is then now where you introduce your cohesion once again. It's now when you're able to reintroduce your trust. Is when you're now able to reintroduce other things that will then help this country keep going.
You can sew together the fabrics again.
Absolutely.
Hey.
But until you deconstruct and go to the core of the matter, we're wasting our time.
Start understanding,
no
first of all, where
document,
did
no
the rain
political
start
rhetoric
beating us?
is going to help in any way.
Let's ask our paragon of knowledge and wisdom, CT. Where did the rain start beating us?
When you think this is a chronological thing, that by virtue of my advanced chronology, automatically I'll have a response.
You can go back and say,
It's difficult to tell when it started, because if you're talking about the value system, let's start with the understanding of family structures and the responsibilities that one should bear within a family. If you see what was called the traditional way of doing things and the changes therein, the rain actually doesn't start beating you then. These are just small showers of change that one anticipates and expects in any society. And this comes about, in our case, because of two things. One, you will talk of independence, you will talk about colonialism, you will talk about education. All these things play a part. And then you come to the stage where you get to how the citizenry began taking over the reins of power and the functions of government. So for the first time, the citizenry could identify with this thing called government leadership, and we realize when you see your people there, as in Africans like you feel this is our government.
Yep.
Okay? Now, the fundamental interest that this particular beginning bears is this. Many people who took over, like in Kenya, one of the things that I think the leaders at independence felt, they needed to show the colonies that they could do this thing. They needed, that they weren't what they had imagined they were, that they needed to prove they could not just run the country, but do better, even do better than them.
Yes.
And in many ways, they did precisely that. Things ran, and we took it for granted that the government would function normally, because the government did function. We could talk about rolling back the time. You had public health services, you had hospital, all these things we talk about worked. People went to public schools. And why? Well, if you look at the fact that we were fewer in number, but the way the colonialists had built these schools, they had used the model of their own countries. Schools would be built with proximity to areas where people lived. In the same way you'd find a hospital. It was planned. It was part of a planning system.
Following population.
Yes, and a good plan to go with it. And these plans were not for 10, 20 years. No. 50, even up to 100.
Yeah.
That's why, for instance, when you look at our roads, you know this thing they call road reserves. It's not just for, it's not just for...
reserved a long time ago.
It's not just for water drainage or pipes or electricity or telephone lines. No. It's also meant for expanding the road. They figured if this population grows, there'll be more traffic. So you'll need to get... All this was part of a plan.
It was anticipated, right?
Yes. But the push was to become more like the white person. We wanted to ensure, and it was considered a mark of improvement. And that's why many parents took their children to, say, former white schools.
Yep.
Yes, and it was a great source of joy when your child came back home swallowing a lot of English. Okay?
English of the nose.
Yes. Yes. It was a sign of improvement, a sign of forward moving. Now, unfortunately, the language comes with its culture. And that's why even in modern times, it has stuck with us. Someone will probably tell you how the child has gone to study abroad.
Yeah.
Well, which most Kenyans call in abroad. It's actually just abroad. There's no in about it.
Overseas.
Overseas. Yes.
One C.
Yes. And all things good. Look at our conversation. Huyu jamaa ni mzungu sana. They are telling you this someone, for instance, who keeps time. This is someone who is orderly.
Yes.
This is someone who keeps his word. See, all these things. So that needs to be like a mzungu. In this country, became the drive. Now, unfortunately...
So we took the good and the bad.
That's what we did. And we thought even the bad was good because these things were new to us.
But what is the bad that we've taken from the Mzungu that now is eating us? For example, is that why we are still... Is the Mzungu corrupt this way?
Of course he is.
This way?
Yes.
The way we are corrupt?
This corruption we have, they introduced it. We didn't have it.
But are they corrupt to this level? Or
Worse. Worse.
They're just able to cover... They're just able to take you off the mark with all these other shiny, glittery things that you wouldn't realize are the
But
case.
they don't eat up the entire country. I mean,
No.
they have corruption.
No. Actually, they did eat up the entire country.
Until
they saw what it did, and they decided, we must give people something.
We need to give them something
They have to have
shiny and bright to look at.
Yes.
So if we were borrowing,
so they're comfortable.
If we were borrowing from them, we'd be borrowing from what we are currently seeing, not what we read about that they were doing in the past, in the 18th or 17th centuries.
But
we'd
you
be
know the
looking
thing
at,
is, they
this
didn't
is what they're doing now, and that's if we are borrowing currently our culture.
But you must understand that what they're very, very careful about what information they make known and what they make public. Do you see it in the news every single day that another corrupt politician has gone down or been arrested or been taken down? You don't see that.
People resign.
They're very people resign every day
And you
in the
negotiate
US,
it.
for
Okay,
example.
you will resign,
Which is why I'm
But
saying,
they're very careful
if
about
we
the
were
information
borrowing-
that they let out there. Very, very
if
careful.
we were borrowing, we'd be borrowing from the information that we get, the information that we consume.
Eric, borrowing works like this. You borrow what suits you. to put it really very simply. It's not complicated. That may have served a purpose, but then there's something you call the novelty of wealth. Our wealth was in cows and land and wives and children. That was our wealth. Now, then brought in, we introduced the Western concept. And with it, the standardization. So you don't just want to be wealthy among your poor Africans. You want to be considered wealthy among your role model as well. Which means you have to steal the entire country, really.
That's how you equate your wealth in dollars.
Yeah, it has to be Kenya shilling wealthy,
Bond Street property kind of thing,
Yes, you want, when a conversation is had, you want to talk about your flat on Bond Street or whichever street.
Bond,
okay.
this is the one.
Yes, or that's the conversation you want to have. So you start nicely. Why do you think that this preponderance of Kenyans who own helicopters? Because there are people who own helicopters abroad. It started off with leasing, now they own. I'm sure there are few even own yachts.
Yes.
Yes, no.
Some Kenyans.
Yes, and on this note, it's not a yacht.
Yacht.
It is a yacht. It's the English and their language. So, we've always equated things that were Western and English as being superior to ours. And we have then mixed our own way of doing things with theirs. What suits us? Our paragon of example will not marry many wives at a go. He'll just divorce and marry continuously. So it's a serial monogamy. Okay? But us, we just pile one on top of the other.
And say, let's just do it all at once instead of doing this.
And just in case people think
other.
that this is against the law, we just change the law. Simple. Now, that's an example of how we mishmash what we want to do and what we emulate. Now, the unfortunate thing is, they evolved and had legal structures that were actually strong and that were adhered to, and that became their tradition. Ours, it hasn't come our tradition. The tradition we have is one of propagating impunity. That's our tradition. That is the growth industry in this country. Remember that ministry I mentioned to you last week? The ministry that pervades everything. The Ministry of Impunity?
Yeah.
Yes. It's the ministry in this country that ensures the strengthening and the growing nature of impunity. And it pervades every sector. It pervades it is democratic. It does not spare anyone. It doesn't pick and choose. It is everywhere. And that's why we keep getting alarmed. Because even where you didn't think it would be. For instance, would anyone know, for instance, that even in church elections, the same way politicians spend money is the way people spend money in church elections?
In church elections.
Exactly the same.
To get elected to be the leader of the flock, you actually pay money to the sheep.
You need to pay money to the sheep.
You feed the sheep so that,
the sheep follow you.
They choose
so
you
they
as a shepherd.
can give you your crook.
Of course.
Essentially.
So if you ask the question, it isn't difficult to answer really. Because the examples are clear and we can see. Even look at the way we dress. I mean, everything about us, we are emulating certain people. All right? Even the way we have our weddings, we still emulate.
So what I hear you say, CT, is that let's blame the West for what's ailing us.
No. This isn't a blame
Because
game.
I started by asking, where did the rain start beating us?
And I've
so
told
we're at a
you,
point
the rain
where
started beating
as
us.
a country,
No,
we've collectively
it was not.
agreed through the BBI that we've, have had moral decay. We've got loss of our values and national ethos. Where did the rain start beating us?
The West didn't tell us to do the things we are doing. No, they imposed certain things on us, yes.
So what caused us to get where we are?
Because we wanted to be the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds. You want to look like a Westerner, you want to sound, you want to be respected because you felt that's how you'd be respected by them and considered as equals, which won't happen. It will actually not happen. An African being considered as an equal
to the
but our brothers in the West, even if you wake up very early in the morning.
Even till today. Till tomorrow.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
We need to look at them as their junior.
They will give you the impression that you're one and the same. You are never the same. You never are. No.
Back to your point.
My point is this. If we are going to apportion blame, I wasn't apportioning blame, I was merely describing a situation. The blame is with us. Because if we didn't have the information that we have now, you could say, they've kept the information. Everything that happens in the world we now see and we now know. So you cannot say you do not have other examples to follow.
Yeah.
You don't.
Right, exactly.
Yes. And the best example that one could think of is maybe the Nordic countries. They are a Western country, but 100 years ago, they're just as poor as us. Suffering. But they decided they were going to change the way they did things. Everything about the way they function is different. Why? They've looked at the models that existed absorbed some of it and changed. When they started their free education system, when they started their free medical system, it's not that they had a lot of money. No. They worked with what they had, but they were committed to it. Our people decide that we have this gullible lot of idiotic Africans whom we can just keep telling lies all the time.
So let's lord our position over them, and
just
then now
keep it and keep. When they ask for something,
So the rain
give
did
them
not
words.
start beating us then. We've just been living in the pond. We probably have just been there. We can't just start saying, there's a point when we had, serious values, and there's a point when we had national ethos.
Eric, we still have values.
At what point did we have those national ethos?
If we didn't have values, this discussion wouldn't actually
Wouldn't
be.
be-
Not to the same degree that, not where we'd like
I'm
to
trying
be.
to explain that you have to understand the change before what we're dealing with and where we came from, to pinpoint and say, okay, this issue became an issue of serious discussion at this point.
at this point.
Yes.
This is when we saw that there was a shift, or this is now when we needed a further understanding of what was going on, because it became too much. It really, at some point, became too much until it now is something that is accepted, and that somebody would look at you as weird or as strange if you were asking the question as per what's going on here.
What's wrong?
And Eric, it only points to the way we do things. Something doesn't become a habit. It doesn't begin as a habit. It's a trait.
It's
This
a
is
trait.
what I said.
It's constantly there.
It's
It's a trait.
repetitive
Yes,
action
it
over
becomes
and
habit,
over and over
and
again.
that habit then just becomes the norm.
The norm.
Now we are at the norm stage.
We are told you that we'll be joined this morning by a guest. So we are joined by a Moran. Good morning, Moran of the Burning Spear, Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Asante sana for joining us.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course, we are talking about national values and ethos and morals. And the first question that we are asking is, where did the rain start beating us? Do you think actually we've been beaten by the rain at any point? Or have we just been living in the pond?
Several stages. I think the breakdown of our moral values has been a cumulative process. But I think the greatest effect has been the content that we consume, particularly the youth. The young people who are impressionable, who pick everything from the media as the gospel truth, who watch musicians and artists on TV, and they think this is cool, and they want to be like Eric, they want to be like the stars that they see on TV, and then those guys misbehave, or the politicians that they admire, insult each other, and they think it's cool. We started this by having freedoms that are not moderated, where there's no balance between freedom and responsibility. I worked as a journalist at The Nation at a time when we knew right and wrong, and there was no bloodline.
There was no grey.
No, there was no gray light.
Black and white.
It was black and white. We knew what to do, and there was no room for mistake. I was a school captain from the day I was in in primary school, secondary school, and I've grown in systems where it was black and white. You knew what to do. When the bell rings, you
know
ran
where
to
to
class,
go.
and there was no argument with the teachers and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But increasingly, as we began to interact with the wider world through the media and exposure, we got the wrong exposure. That's why it's so critical for us to go back to the basics. Begin from the family, ensure that kids are taught the right manners as they grow up, from the churches as they go to Sunday school, from the mosques as they go to madrasas. These discussions about moral values needs to be at the corporate table. It needs to be at the pulpit. It needs to be everywhere. We've got to realize that we have a problem, and to arrest this problem, we've got to have a holistic approach to it. There
are two arguments. There are those who actually say that we don't have a problem, right? So that's one.
I don't think anybody thinks we have no problem.
And there are those who may think.
Some
I've
people
not
who think
made-
we are fine.
Your view
Oh,
of
really?
your view of the problem is not their view of the problem. So if they sat down with you, then as far as they're concerned, if that's what the problem is, then we don't have a problem.
Essentially, they'll tell you that is your problem.
That is your problem.
Not
Probably
That- not everybody.
my approach to the solution or what I think is a problem.
Yes.
But we have a problem. Youths are complaining there are no jobs. Why don't we have jobs? Everybody's complaining the economy is bad. Right now there are people in a matatu who are being treated to very obscene content, and they don't know what to do. They are held captives in that public transport vehicle. There's nothing they can do because the Makanga will not hear anything about it, and a policeman will be bribed, will not, take action. How can you say we have no problem when our youths are committing suicide and we have such a high level of crime and corruption and everything? I think we all agree there's a problem. What we need to discuss is how do we resolve? And I like the question you're asking. Where did the water start beating us? I think we need to trace the root cause and take action to resolve this issue. It's not, we cannot bury our heads under the sand and say, there's no problem, we are okay. We are not okay.
We're not. The BBI report has told us, they went around the country and they picked it out. The vibe from the country is we have a problem. You keep, bringing it out and saying, the media and what we consume. Whereas I agree that the media is, propagating some of the ills that we have in the society. I don't think it's the only one to blame. I don't actually think it's the main culprit here. I think it starts further down at family level.
Absolutely. But Eric, unless you want to deny the power of the media, if we all believe that the media is powerful, that the media is a catalyst for shaping values, then we cannot remove the blame from the media. Either it has contributed consciously or unconsciously. But the thing is that since the liberalization of the media airwaves, from 1990s, early 90s, when KTN came into being, you used to have KBC. That time things were easy. It was easy to regulate the media that time.
It was easy to control what people are
Then
consuming.
we came to multipartyism, where politicians started taking on the government, and we could hear people talking to the president in a manner that we were not used to. Everybody would shudder. But we started getting used to it. We started seeing Maandamano and Sabasaba, and the media got liberalized. The challenge was after the what they used to call there was a parliamentary resolution that was enacted as law in terms of changing the way we approach politics.
IPPG?
IPPG. From the 1997-1998 IPPG resolutions, I think we went to the pendulum swung to the other extreme, and we allowed liberalization of the media without a tenant framework for regulation, so that now we started having gutter press. I remember that's the time yellow journalism came, yellow papers littered the street. That's where we could see almost more or less like the Ugandan red pepper. You'd find them anywhere in the streets, and the people's names would be tarnished. Family values would be, destroyed. You'd find people's reputations and a scandal, and people started thriving in sleaze and scandals and so on, things that we were not used to. And Kenyans are very curious people, like Michael Joseph once said. We have very peculiar habits. And the Kenyans left to their own devices, they can destroy themselves. We are that peculiar. So we went to the other extreme, and we thought it was fun insulting the president. We thought it was fun resisting the systems. So strikes started coming up in schools, riots, and so on and so forth. And we started taking these people who are championing these kind of causes as heroes. Now, there's a sense in which we didn't differentiate from the people agitating for political change, which was a good thing, and the manner in which they were doing it. Because insulting the president as a person does not help, does not change anything. Championing the cause of liberalization was a good thing, but we picked the wrong habits and the wrong traits from these politicians, went to the other extreme. And the media was now taking it, and the media that became popular, actually, that's how KBC started losing out in the matrix of popularity, because the media that was not showing the Sabasaba, people fighting, throwing stones, and police confronting,
showing the reality on the ground.
These are the things that shape values. And our young people think it's heroism when they see these kind of things.
Who's to say that the opposite then is true? Who's to say that it's not heroism for them? Who is to say that what we see that we would call wrong values in this case, if we're looking now at morals, is not the case. And if that person existed, at what point then should they have come in to say, look, folks, we are going in the wrong direction? Because we've talked about the fact that what people hold as a belief is not something that they got as a snap of the fingers yesterday. It has been over time, it has been repetitive in nature, and then that's what they now hold on to as a belief or a value. Or if we say that morals flew out the window, it is over time. So then that means, to me, I see then, was there then a failure at some point by someone? And if that's who, then is that someone?
It's
in the absence of Ezekiel Mutua.
It's a society
as a watchdog.
Ezekiel Mutua came late in the day.
Exactly. So
I actually came in strategically at the level of digital migration because I thought we were expanding the media space and the spectrum, more players coming in. And I championed the process of digital migration when I was Secretary of Information. So immediately after 2015, when we moved from analog to digital, I got an opportunity to serve as the CEO of KFCB. And when I joined, I looked at the law, the Films and Stage Plays Act, and the critical role of regulation in creating the balance. And this is now where I answer your question. Who is to do it? I think the failure has been the lack of balance. I think in life, you need moderation. If you do anything to the extreme, it becomes poisonous. And so what happened is we imbibed these freedoms and went to the extreme, thinking it's fun. We picked new cultures that came with the new media, picked them as way of life, promoted them without responsibility. And the balance between freedom and responsibility is what has created this problem. So that discipline became something that is not treasured, that is not praised. And we got into a culture where...
It became negative. It was presented as something negative.
Exactly. That if you're okay, look at what the media, how even the media conditions newsmakers. And I've been a newsmaker for almost 20 years, since I ran for Secretary General of Kenya Union of Journalists in 2001. I have seen us being conditioned that if you are genuine and you are modest and you just go to a press conference and just stick to the point and you don't dramatize or insult, you don't get coverage.
Even if you do get coverage,
it will be at the back burner. You know, I have seen my stories near the obituaries when I thought I said very important things.
Dead is innocent.
And then you see another guy who insulted another one publicly, who did shameful things. That's a guy who's given the front page.
Yep.
That's a guy who's given the first item on TV and on radio. So we started conditioning newsmakers that if you don't say bizarre things, controversial, if you don't insult the president or other people, you are not popular. Popularity and heroism is when you say crazy things.
That is the
when
nature
you bang
of
the
news.
table.
But that's the nature of news. We're all trained and taught to
it.
understand. You know this very well. You're taught to
When
understand.
you were practicing
we were taught
who
that
were you
when
giving
a dog
prominence?
bites a man, it's not news.
Yes.
But when a man bites a dog, it's
That's where the news
but
is.
that's the wrong narrative. There must be a balance. Let me tell you, Eric, there's no freedom without responsibility.
It depends on the circumstances surrounding the biting of the man.
This
or
is
the
the
dog.
challenge that we have. Let me tell you. During Moi's days and before, I don't know how long we have this system in education where people, before you join university, you used to go to the NYS, the National Youth Service. And this is the recommendation I'm giving. For us to restore our moral values, we got to get... There are two approaches to it. One must be the magic bullet theory, the magic bullet action. There must be a drastic action. And I pray to God that it will not have to go the way of Rwanda for us to get to our senses and realize that this is not an argument that we need to embrace as a way of life. We don't have to go to a genocide. We are heading there. We are right on the cliff. It's not a joke. We don't have to get there, but we could get there. It could be one of the things that will shake us and jar us into action. The other one would be for policymakers to get our youth, who are the future of our country, to go to NYS, to ensure that our youth go to the join the Scout movement and Girl Guide, and join the NYS, and that jobs in public service in particular, even in the private sector, will be predicated on your history and the positions that you held and how you have proven yourself in your school life as a responsible individual.
Let's come back and discuss that. That's one of the proposals that you have. We'll look at them, and also what other proposals we have on what is it that we need to ensure that we bring the country back, like the president said on Jamhuri Day, the river back to its cause. On the hot seat this morning is Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board. Broadcasting in Nairobi on 94.4, we're in Mombasa, it's 7.9, Kisumu 102.5, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, 90.9 Nyeri, 97.7 in Malindi. We're also live streaming, as we always do, on Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, as well as www.spicefm.co.ke. In the Situation Room this morning, my name is Eric Latif. We have CT Muga Nduoko. And on the hot seat, we're joined by Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board. We're talking about national ethos and values. And before we get to the magic bullet solution that you're proposing, Dr. Mutua, let's also look back at how this moral decay is presenting itself in our society. What is it that what are those avenues that, or those things that we see that signify that we have lost it? Not our marbles, but lost our values.
Oh, part
Maybe
of it
some,
as
maybe
well.
some of the marbles, I'm telling you.
Even our marbles are gone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, it's through the media. I think the eyes of the world are through the media. We interact through the media. We embrace one another. We like and hate people based on what we see on the media, what we read, and what we know about them. For me, and probably the obsession is because of where I sit.
I think
and,
so, because
my
I'm thinking,
career has just been in this.
as you're coming back to the media, I keep taking you back to that basic family unit.
Isn't
Yes,
the
yes,
media
yes,
isn't
but-
the media a reflection of society? Doesn't
But
the
let-
media give off then what people
The media,
show?
the
Not
media,
necessarily.
and this is a deep conversation because, and I speak as an expert. I mean, this is my area. This is what I've done. I've been on all the sides of the divide as a practitioner, as a trade unionist,
And now as a regulator.
as a policymaker, as a regulator. So I have looked at it from different sides, and also as a researcher. I mean, this is my master's and my PhD. In communication studies, and there's a sense in which looking at the power of the media, not just in Kenya but globally. Even when you look at the scenarios that are panned out in what caused the genocide in Rwanda, you find the media in it. If you look at what is happening in China right now and how China has rebuilt its economy to a superpower, lifting themselves out of poverty and growing to where they are, see the role of the media. The other most powerful one is the governance paradigm and how people chose to be governed and how those ethos of and values are ingrained in the system. That requires, in our situation, a benevolent dictator. That's what is happening in Rwanda with tremendous respect to the
streamline
regime
things.
of President Paul Kagame. But everybody's looking towards Rwanda. No magic. What President Paul Kagame has done is just to ensure that the country has values and there is no room for discussion. If you're driving in the streets of Kigali and you knock a tree as a motorist, the fine is worse than what we do here when you knock a human being. Okay? You're jailed. I think the fines are, I think, almost 20 years.
So there you go. You see, you're talking
And
about
what they do-
You're talking about a leader.
Yes.
You're talking about a society. You're talking about a leadership, and the media is a tool. The media is not the one that is leading this conversation. The media cannot be the one that is leading the moral decay.
No, I agree
It's
with
just
you.
a
And
tool
we
that's
are
being
not
used
at
by
war. We are
something
not at
else.
war. We spend a lot of time. It looks like us versus them. First of all, I am pointing at the media because I regulate the media. So
This is
I
what
think
you know.
my specialty for coming here can only be to offer,
You're also a member of the society.
and to look at it in
Dr.
terms
Mutua.
of
You've said
how-
you've also played in policy.
I said I believe in the power of the media. I believe that journalists, a responsible journalist with a pen and a camera and a notebook can change the world. It has happened elsewhere. It can happen in our country. I've talked about governance and having leaders who are firm in values and setting the systems that are not negotiable. If you're going wrong, you know it's white, it's black and white. And I think for us, we need to interrogate this situation, like you said, from all circles, including the family, the breakdown of the family values. But let me tell you, even when I was growing up, in fact, it was worse in our time because you find a parent working in Malindi or Mombasa who comes home, maybe the father in
Once
the
a
house.
quarter.
Once a quarter a year or half a year, and we were still fine. some of the families and no role models, and we still grew up well because children belonged to the community, and everybody looks to take care of everybody. The situation has changed. That's why I'm saying right now the media has remained as the champion of our values and the custodian of these values, and therefore, if we are going to change the narrative, I think the media has got to agree that it has a great role, because our kids watch and our kids imitate. They say mangi see, mangi do, and our kids are a product of the kind of content that they consume. The next one is, of course, our school system, the pedagogy that we give to our children, and how that curriculum and the schooling system is supposed to affect our kids to grow to become responsible human beings. That's why I'm recommending the drastic measures of having the National Youth Service as mandatory course for anybody going through the school system.
In all this, where do you see the role of the parents?
Obviously,
And the
that's
church.
where it begins. You start, that's where the values begin. Values begin at the family level. But I've
You see why I asked the question?
like I've said, you
Yes.
see before City,
Yes.
the parent word was what shaped the values. But now
more.
you leave your kids with the TV, with the radio, they're exposed to so much. Not like in the days of yore, where it was society and it was responsibility and there were people watching. Right now, parents are busy. You wake up very early in the morning. Courtesy of this show, I am to leave before seeing my children. You guys, I don't know whether you have children and how you manage your families.
We do it every
So the
day,
moment,
Monday to Friday.
what do you do?
Every day, Monday
we
to
leave
Friday,
without seeing
You are
go to
here
our children in the morning. Yes.
very early in the morning.
Yes, before
That
they
is
wake
the
up.
typical parent in Kenya today. And you cannot blame the parent because they're aching a living. They're trying to provide for the family. Times are hard. And so let us say we need to have an all-round approach to this issue. So the parents have a duty to play, but they're not as available as they used to be. And there's exposure. Children are left to other devices that inform or inform their values and shape the way they
Dr.
kind of
Mutua,
they become.
with urbanization, even long before the media had this center stage that we are now discussing, people held their rural homes as a place of with great reverence. So it was even known that during school holidays, children would go home. So these values we speak of would be further entrenched because in the rural areas,
Yes.
they had not been dissipated.
Yes.
Now, if you go back to a time like that, that's why I brought in the issue of parents, where now parents would ensure parents who both come from a similar community and speak the same language do not, for instance, further the language of their community, which is part and parcel of a heritage and a tradition, and they further this language that we are now speaking,
Yes.
and with it comes the norms that you are.
Absolutely.
Because if you disregard that which was fundamental to an older generation,
Yes.
then it means you have abrogated and taken up a completely new one.
Yes.
And so this decay we are speaking of is not very difficult then to understand.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, City. I mean, so that's a point that we don't need to add anything. It's safe to say that even in our role as a regulator, we always say we cannot come and regulate in your bedroom. I mean, a parent has got to tell the kid, this program is not suitable for you.
Yep.
Switch off the TV, do your homework, go out and play. That parental role cannot be abrogated.
Sure.
We've got to play our role.
All right.
The religious institutions have got to play their role. So that's why I said it's a agency approach to resolving this issue. And I'm so happy that it has been captured by the BBI report that we have a challenge, that we seem to celebrate the wrong people and demonize the good people. And you see, if you want to see a society that is rotten, it's a society that canonizes thieves and demonizes good people, so that good people in society are not celebrated, they're not seen as heroes, but our kids are given other models and other sort of definition of success that is based on shortcuts and theft and corruption.
To add to what you say, I have a different take on it. And this is partly because, you see, you spoke from your background, and I agree with you completely. Now, I am a teacher. I began my career as an educator. I now do different things, but that's a place I worked in for the longest time.
And it's shaped the way you think as well.
It shaped the way I think, but it also made me understand the role of education in the lives of students. And I started by saying the rot set in when the government of Kenya decided that education was the course they gave to people who could not qualify for what they wanted.
So when you can't, you
Meaning,
teach.
yes, if you're going to university and you want to be an engineer and you can't make it, education. If you wanted to be a doctor and you can't make it, education. Now, why am I saying this? I saw this because an earlier generation had been taught by people who wanted to teach, and education and educators were held in very high regard in society.
Absolutely.
They were role models.
And you see, that's a challenge we have now, City.
Yes.
Because today, you see a socialite parading themselves, and you give them a lot of time here.
Yes.
A professor from the university, or a guy with an innovation.
First of all, they're paid poorly. They're paid very poorly. And then, that respect that I speak of has now been passed on to the university.
Absolutely. But life is not just about pay. I mean, I don't think
There's a reason why I'm going with
was
the pay.
paid so well.
There's why I'm mentioning this. In modern times, pay is commensurate with respect, but that's not what I wanted to pay.
And
What I wanted to
lifestyle,
say
and
was,
your
what I wanted
lifestyle
to say
also.
was, if you have an entire generation of people who are doing a job like teaching, which for many was a vocation, and it is not their first love, the antipathy and the disregard which is in their mind as having been denied what they wanted is passed on in their teaching.
There's a very powerful quote that I'm told is in a university in South Africa, a signpost that says, to destroy a nation, destroy the quality of education.
Yes.
Dilute it, let kids learn that cheating is no more.
Yes.
And then you produce, they're saying, the architect that come out of that, they will build houses that will collapse and kill
Yes.
people, doctors that will prescribe the wrong medicine,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. So I agree, the role of education, and I mentioned it, it's very critical.
And you see, teachers actually spend more time with the children than
children,
the parents.
yes.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Why don't we have films that show a teacher as a hero? Why don't we have content that respect university
Why
professors
don't we have a
and
government?
innovators?
Why don't we have a government
That respects the
that
teachers.
respects teachers and pays them the salaries they're paying MPs?
CT, Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States of America, said he was given to choose between a government without the media and a media without the government. He would not hesitate to choose the latter. I think we're in a situation where you are denying the power of the media, and yet you want to be praised and given freedom. We have to agree that the media is powerful. The media shapes values.
powerful.
The media sets the agenda.
It does.
And if the media plays its role well, for example, if you said we are not going to give coverage to a warmonger, even in this BBI narrative and conversation, say if you're not going there to articulate your points, educate your people
We're not
without,
covering you.
without partisan and drawing in
Sentiments,
emotions, you're not going to get coverage on KTN, on Spice FM. Do you know they will shape up?
Another
That's how
conversation
simple
will
it
emerge
is.
there, Dr. Mutua. You know, in
Remove
terms
the
of
cameras from warmongers and
you're
from
gagging
thieves.
people. I
In
mean,
terms of freedoms now, because
in
then
whose
I think it
opinion?
would
No,
be-
that's not freedom.
Well, I think it would be interesting.
responsibility.
It would
Let's
be
take
necessary
a
to
short
have the
break.
conversation and reconciling then between some of these freedoms we talk about and then also some of the responsibility, because those two definitely there's a place where they cross.
It's 13 minutes to 8 o'clock. Good morning. This is the Situation Room.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. 96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Dr. Ezekiel Mutua is in the hot seat this morning in the Situation Room right here. He's talking about, values and all, and he's basically sticking the line. But the media has a role to play in this, central and pivotal role to play in bringing the country back to high morals and, acceptable norms of morality. Now, of course, you also had started giving us what you'd considered your magic bullet. Say that all the youth are taken to the National Youth Service
Yes.
and indoctrinated.
Not indoctrinated.
That's what happens.
I think we need a platform
That's what would happen.
which removes us. Magic bullet.
Yeah.
Magic bullet is basically that. I mean, see what President Kagame does in Rwanda.
Yep.
There's a day they sweep the streets. Even the president is there leading the way.
Yep.
I'm trying to say,
In fact, Dr. Mutua, they had on the whole month of April, no partying, no nothing. You just go to work, go home. A whole month.
magic bullet, where we know this is law, You got to do it. We've seen it in our country when the president said we are going to fight corruption and even interdicted finance and procurement officers in the government. I can tell you that bang sort of walk people to the reality that is not business as usual. And I think we need to get somewhere. And I said, do not allow this country to go the way of Rwanda for us to realize even we in the media exist when there is peace in this country.
Yep.
So don't give microphones and cameras and airtime to warmongers and to people of nothing, no morality, no values. People are insulting. I mean, I saw a member of parliament. I can't call him even a mweshimiwa. Insulting another one. You heard the story. I can't repeat the words that they said. that we are going to shave everywhere that can be shaved. Sorry to say it on air. And you give that guy coverage, and then you make him look like a hero, and you celebrate those kind of people. That is where you remove the microphone, and that guy realizes, oh, so when I insult another leader in a public podium, I am not building my name. I'm not endearing myself to my constituency. But the moment when I say those unpalatable things, to look like that's when I get coverage. And the other guy who is okay and decent and just promotes peace and speaks about development and values does not get coverage. You are setting the newsmakers up to
you have
embracing this unpalatable kind of behavior.
In that particular example that you've given, that was actually being broadcast on social media by social media platforms. Mainstream media steered clear of that particular incident.
I tend to think it's because we condemned it. We called it out right there.
Yes.
I think
instantly you got the information through social media. You are not at that
absolutely,
rally.
And that's why I said digital migration has brought in a different paradigm in terms of the way we consume the media.
So how do we regulate now that in social media?
I have a 21 and 13-year-olds, and they don't watch local TV
because of what you have done.
No, not quite. I mean, we sit together at the sitting room to watch news. The first item is a rape. The second item is some politician who insulted another. The third one is murder. And we're like, we don't want to go to bed depressed. So this is horror. So we decided news is horror.
So you switch to international news where you find somebody has shot kids in a church.
But if you are a serious parent,
Yeah.
you do not want to expose your children to the local TV.
Okay, so I hear you saying now, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. What I hear you saying is that we've already established the fact that in the day and age in which we live in today, parents have in one way or another abrogated the responsibility of watching over their children to media because they have to work or whatnot, because they have to be away at early hours of the day till late hours in the night. So what I'm hearing you say in essence is that because they're left to the vices that we see on media, what you're saying is that should be regulated to the point whereby whatever that they are receiving needs to be whole, moral, etc. Is that what we're saying? To the point whereby if we are forced to leave children, young people, because we're saying it's at that level, it's at that level of education, it's at that level where they're being socialized. If they have to be left to those vices, it needs to be regulated to the point that what they're ingesting, what they're seeing, hearing, has to be of sound moral content value.
Absolutely.
Is it possible to operate?
No. Can I add a but here?
The point I wanted to make is there is need for a national conversation on the role of the media in this BBI report on ethos and values, okay? National conversation, which is about how do we self-regulate, how do we make the media more responsible. Number two, we are also saying that the absent parent today, the one who is waking up very early and coming late, tired, and so on, does not have as much time for their children as we used to be. And the children are more exposed to the media, whether it's the vehicle that is picking them from home to take them to school, they are on Spice FM or Classic 105. And they're listening. The driver likes that. And they're treated to adult content against the watershed principles. And we are saying, how about if we said, we just have a conversation like this, it's watershed period. We do not have to say or to discuss adult stuff that would expose our children wrongly. But what we hear, some radio stations play pornography on the airwaves in the morning. And that bus that is taking kids to school, or the parent taking kids to their school, they are on that radio and kids are exposed to that. I'm just saying there's need for a conversation that will make the media realize that there's multiplicity of channels whether you're talking about social media.
I think you should start
or
from the audience,
mainstream.
Dr. Mutua, because the audience is the one that's making this choice. If I start a
Children have no choice. One of the basic,
The
one of the
adults-
core mandates of
Switch off
Kenya
the
film.
radio.
the
or-
the adults are making the choice to actually listen to this.
And I agree.
Some of these adults have their own children in the vehicles. Some of the adults are choosing. These are the matatu drivers or whatever. They are adults.
Let me tell you, Eric.
why are
no
you
parent
forgetting-
wants their children to watch
If
pornography.
they choose
Eric
all
and
these
Dr.
things,
Mutua, why are you forgetting that in children listening to this content, you have an opportunity to actually discuss these things with them, not for them to listen all the time because they will hear it. The opportunity is there for you
Yes.
to discuss it. One. Number two, these parents being busy, it is actually not entirely true. Parents have always been busy. It is more the position and the priority that children have in the parents' lives. Modern parents want to live their lives. So they want to push their children into either a boarding setup or some maid who looks after them. Everybody has 24 hours, and it's a decision you make to give your children time and for them to be a priority. Even those of us who wake up at this hour, we have to make a choice as the time when you know I have to make this time to be with these children. It's
And
a choice.
City, the fact is, this conversation is about the balance in the exigencies of life today,
Yes.
as opposed to the multiplicity of exposure of content that children are exposed to.
Or the parents,
Compared-
even the parents exposed
No,
this
compared
exposure.
to the time in the past.
No, that
yeah.
wasn't
I mean, it's an important
was a
point
different
here.
time, yes.
That times are changing, and we have liberalized the media. We are in digital
And there's a
space.
lot competing for our interest.
Yes,
With globalization,
parents,
there's technological
to blame.
advancements.
If you're going to give your children an iPhone, it is your duty to ensure that they understand that it can be a double-edged sword.
Yes.
And I think that's the role that KFCB is playing, to create awareness more than just coming to block or to ban. We are now embarked on a sensitization program. We are now sponsoring the Kenya National Drama and Film Festival to get those kids who are acting to know that you can be responsible. And the theme that we are using, and we used last year, is promoting moral responsibility. We saw this 2 years ago before the BBI. We came up with a theme in collaboration with Ministry of Education under the National Drama and Film Festival, with the theme promoting moral responsibility in society through drama and film. And that's a huge program from ECD to university that we are working with the Ministry of Education to ensure that from the primary school, we can have themes that reflect the issues, in, society, but with a moral, with a story, with a message, so that our songs, our poems, our acting, our films, there's a message, and that message promotes moral values.
Yep.
That message promotes hard work, positive social values like honesty, like hard work, like teamwork, like perseverance, and so on. And we believe that
do you see it working?
That's a long time. We started only last year.
Right.
I said there are two ways. There's either magic bullet or cumulative effect,
cumulative one.
where maybe in 20 years the society will be different. But in the magic bullet, it can either be a tragedy that will also take us down the cliff like in Rwanda, God forbid, or it could be
Decisive
a
action that we
drastic
take.
action, like I say, take every kid to NYS.
Do we need a
Make it a policy.
Where we've reached now, because we said the rain is beating us, so we're wet. I mean, it's short of finding a place to hang out and dry. Something needs to be done right now to stop the rain, or at least get away from under it. So don't we need a drastic action now with some of the things that we see? I mean, we've heard you be extremely vocal about some of the music that has come out, some of the films that have come out that have been banned in Kenya. I mean, and that's just, probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of what needs to be done. Do we need drastic action now, or is it something that then, do we need a reconditioning of minds?
Yes.
Over time, because obviously reconditioning is not something that you will do instantly. It takes time.
Exactly, and that's why I talked about the cumulative effect, the
Right.
grandeur,
So,
sensitization.
Do we need a magic bullet now, or do we need something over time to change?
We need a
because
combination
obviously
of both.
this contamination.
So we need both.
The
At
contamination
the same time.
The
Yeah.
contamination
Why
took
wait for
time.
NYS at that later stage? Why not start earlier? Why?
You see, like I've told you, in the Kenya National Drama and Film Festival,
That's a cumulative one.
we are starting from
in our
ECB,
magic
it's
bullet.
cumulative.
Why not start? So
In
we'll
the
start with
magic
the
bullet,
children,
I think with the BBI.
But you and I, Dr. Mutua, as parents, we also need to be shot by this bullet.
I think
because
so.
yes,
I agree.
So we take our kids to NYS, but
Yes.
then they come home and they still find us,
Exactly where we were.
Exactly.
No.
where we were.
Let's
still
start
gonna
with the
corrupt
parent.
them.
I think
Or they go to NYS for a short period of time, and then they say, okay, it's just for a short period
And
of
then
time.
they
I'm
come
going to be
out.
able to get back to my life as I was before.
It was not like that. I think if we bring that as a system of bringing up our children, and it will have effect in terms of the way they get their jobs. That if there are two jobs that we are competing for, and one person has gone through NYS or has been a member of the Scouts movement, the other one has not, the guy was been with the Scouts or has gone to NYS gets the job. So there's a reward and punishment system, sort of, if you want to call it so. A magic bullet would work that way. That parents need also to play their role. Religious institutions need to play their role. But I think out of this BBI, we can propose something that is going to be drastic, but another one that is going to be long-term.
Let's look at those drastic and long-term measures shortly for the next 10 minutes. We're coming up to the top of the hour. It's coming to 8 o'clock in the Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room this morning, we have Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board. We are talking about national ethos, morals and values, and what we need to cure the country. So some comments and questions also coming in on the social media platforms, and we're going to be looking at them shortly. We have one here. It says, Dr. Mutua is very good at attacking those that he has power over, but he can barely muster a coherent argument against the corrupt and incompetent government that he serves in, that is daily eroding the moral fiber of this nation.
I'm not the head of ESCC. I mean,
No?
people confuse things. See, people tell me, why you're not attacking people are stealing. My role is to regulate the media.
But you can call them out.
I do, but that's not my mandate. I'm governed by law. The law that I enforce is called Films and Stage Plays Act. It regulates the media. So this is my domain. So I'm vocal in my domain.
So you stick to your lane.
I stick to my lane. So if it's about promoting films or developing films that speak about these issues, yes, I do promote that. But it's not my duty to arrest people who are corrupt or people who are stealing. I mean, people need to understand. I need to get this conversation. I'm giving due a summarized version of this report because she's very good at reading. I wish, and this is a very important topic, Latif.
Well,
Guys,
I mean,
you couldn't choose a better topic at a time like this, and I wish we could have that summarized version because it speaks about the short term and the long term, speaks about embracing our culture, talks about rebuilding our national institutions that speak about our culture, including the National Archives, the National Museum, and starting to retrace our history. Like I said, that's a summarized version of the BBI.
So what's the leakage?
But in
the
long
summarized
term,
version of the
the
BBI.
BBI.
Okay, well, look, based on what you've talked about on your mandate as regulating the media,
Yes.
if we look at the shortened form, I mean, one, write the official history of Kenya as a nation, begin to think big and long term. Our vision of this country must go beyond our lives and into the generations ahead. Be confident in our African skin, and must strengthen our African identity.
Yes.
Promote ethics in the country.
Yes.
Yeah, so
There's
those
something
those
about
are the
culture.
four.
There's a
Right, then
there's a
under
important one.
culture, teaching ethics as a compulsory subject, removing the ethics mandate, including teachings of the national values and principles. And then, of course, under culture, they're revamping the Kenya National Archives and Documentation, strengthening the Ministry of Culture and Heritage. Now, through that, how then does this come through in making sure then the media is regulated to make sure that people see or don't see or hear or not hear what they should be hearing?
And first of all, let's not take the regulation of the media to mean by government. I'm talking about self-regulation and promoting professionalism and responsibility, and the media appreciating the power it wields in shaping values for better or worse. So that when we see songs like Wamlambez becoming a national anthem, I ask myself, what is the message? What is so catchy? What is so important about shouting Wamlabe, Wamunyonye, and you want to make it a national anthem? How is that important?
It's a generational thing.
It takes a
Dr.
very
Mutua.
lazy, idiotic mind.
It's a generational thing, Dr.
What
Mutua.
generational? Let
You
me ask
guys,
you. Let me
you
ask
guys
you.
who are half
When
a
you-
century and above.
You
will
don't-
not- will
you
not
wouldn't
get it.
understand.
So Eric, you are modern. Let's assume
The
you are modern.
35s and below will get it.
Let me give you the benefit of the doubt. Assume
Yes.
that you are modern. It's the greatest favor I can ever give you, to assume that you can even be modern. But let me ask you. So how cool is it to say Wamlambe? How does it make you a hero?
I
How
don't-
does it make you feel?
I don't get it, Dr. Mutua.
You don't get it
I
like
am
me.
not in that age bracket.
Thank you.
Those in that age bracket get it.
And this is
and
the
if you
point.
ask them, when you ask them, what do they tell you?
This is the point.
I can tell you one of the things they tell you, Dr. Mutua, and it's very clear. They said, look, as opposed to, it's expressing what people are thinking anyway, but here is a platform upon which they can express.
And we
it.
want to take that creativity nurture it in a way that it contributes positively to society by saying that we don't glorify even songs like that and content that does not have value or that promotes obscenity. Let me tell you, I spent about 2 weeks in my constituency. In 2000, Mwala, I come from Machakos County. My sub-county is called Mwala. And in 2017, we did a survey.
Is it where that inspector on TV comes from?
Yes. No. Yeah, but it's named after my place. But this is a point city. We did a survey in 2017 about the effects of vulgar vernacular music on the youth in 2017. My community, the Kamba community, came top. They had such obscene music, you can't believe it.
Really?
That even the stage names of the bands were so obscene. There was a band called Katombi. There was another called Maima. And if you look at that, they were sexual in nature. And this music was playing everywhere. And we called it out and said, this is dangerous. Do you know what has happened? Let me give you the effect. I'm summarizing.
Right.
As I spent time in Ukambani, we were getting results, and these were published even by the national media. About 600 students in a very small area in Makueni were pregnant when they were sitting for the exams last year. In the place where I come from, for the first time, I heard from the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Police who comes from that area saying that there was a case of sodomy. An old man was sodomized. It's something we never used to hear about. When we raised these things, people reacted the way you're saying, oh, it's cool. This is our times. Times have changed. Now we are hearing such stuff in the rural areas. It's our kids that are being molested,
That's what they're exposed
raped.
to.
It's our kids that are being defiled. It's even going to the old people. I've never had in Ukambani a situation like that. We don't even have a name for an old man being sodomized. We don't have a name for it in our vernacular. So there's something about music and about art and about media that it does to the minds, particularly impressionable minds, in creating impressions that are right or wrong.
Yep.
And I think if we don't check this and we do not counter it through music and through the same platforms that we have used to destroy them, to destroy our values. And I can tell you, I believe with all my heart that the media has greatly contributed to the moral rot that we experience in this country. The media must be part of the conversation to reverse the situation.
Now, you've been there. You've been at the helm of the KFCB for a number of years now. And even before that, you were the director of information.
Yes.
So you've had this conversation with the media. What kind of feedback do you get from the media?
I think we have traded.
I'm sure you speak
what
to all
I get
levels
is
of media,
what I'm hearing
leadership
today
and
from
those
you,
in
that we have
practice.
traded our values for money. We think money is everything as long as your program is popular, as long as the situation room will trade and it will be popular, anything goes. And that's why some stations are running pornography in the morning and they are the most popular. They will beat Spice and the situation room because
No, we're taking over,
you're not doing pornography. This is sad. This is a tragedy of our time. We must never celebrate this because it has serious effects. When the chips are down, and I was here, I was the director of information during the 2007-2008 post-election violence. I saw media houses that went into losses and into lay off journalists because the economy went down.
Yep.
When this country burns, nobody's safe. I think we've got to agree that the media has to set the right agenda. Do your role. Let the parents do their role. Let the government do its role. Let us all collaboratively agree that we have a problem and we cannot leave our country to continue the way it is. And embrace the BBI report that says let us have long-term big plans. And that's why I talked about the magic bullet. And also let us, engrave this ethos, inculcate moral values in our kids through drama and film festival, through our music, through our art.
Mandatory teaching of ethics.
Let us change our stories, Eric. Let our stories be stories of happiness. While there's depression, we are bombarding people with the depressing, horrific stories day by day, and we are only giving prominence to negativity as opposed to the happy story and the nice development stories that are taking place. Let's change the cameras to people who are doing the right thing. Let us focus our cameras on heroes in the villages, in the churches, in schools who are doing the right thing. Let us not glorify evil, because as we do so, we are destroying the moral fabric of our society, and no one will be safe. There will come a time when the poor will have nothing to eat but the rich. I am telling you, there's something so beautiful about you waking up and coming to work and nobody's attacking you.
Yeah. Indeed.
Getting out of this station and going home knowing that you are safe.
Asante
We
sana,
are
Dr.
preaching
Mutua.
anarchy, and the consequences are too grave to contemplate.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll invite you again. Of course, you've joined us in our conversations via phone, and now here you are in person. You are as good a preacher on the phone as you are live. We had Dr. Ezekiel Mutua, the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Film Classification Board. We're asking what magic pill or bullet do we need to revive our national ethos. Of course, he's given us his thoughts on that, and we appreciate very much for all that. And thank you very much for all the comments as well that you're posting on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter as well. The conversation continues. This is the Situation Room.